am Gina Duvernay, the Adult Services Manager for Gwinnett County Public Library, and we do this all the time. So thank you for coming out. If you're not plugged in, you can join our newsletter. It only comes out once a month. We're not trying to inundate you every day with emails because nobody likes that. Especially for the ones who don't have email addresses, but they don't look at their email address. I'm not looking at anyone in particular, but anyway. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and we'll jump right in. I'm going to read the bios from our lovely guests tonight, starting with our moderator, Janelle Williams. Can you wave? Very good. That's Janelle Williams. She's received her BA from Howard University and her MFA in creative writing from Manhattanville College. She was a 2017 Kimbilio, I was way off, fiction fellow, and her work has appeared in The Normal School, Shenandoah, Passages North, Split Lip Magazine, that's a tongue twister, and Lunch Ticket, among others. She is currently the Director of Programs and Outreach for Writopia Lab. Gone Like Yesterday is her debut novel. So I got Writopia right, but nothing else. Okay. Now, Terah Shelton Harris, our featured author for the evening. Hey, very good. She has the best profession in the world. Well, I don't know if you have it much longer, but she's a librarian. Did you know that? Right, a librarian and a writer, of course. She writes upmarket fiction with bittersweet endings. Her work has appeared in consumer and trade magazines, including Catapult, Women's Health, Every Day with Rachel Ray, Backpacker, Minority Nurse, and more. Long After We Are Gone is her second novel. Her first novel, her debut novel, was One Summer in Savannah. Please welcome them both.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Of course, I want to thank the Gwinnett County Public Library and Gina Duvernay, and of course, Terah Shelton Harris for writing such a phenomenal book.
Thank you.
There's so much to talk about with Long After We Are Gone. It's smart, evocative, beautifully written. There's romance, some steamy romance, but it's also informative, especially in regards to air property and the long history of Black people involuntarily losing land at the expense of air property loopholes. And the author's note at the beginning of the book, you mentioned that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has recognized air property as the leading cause of Black involuntary land loss, and that it is estimated that between 1910 and 1977, Blacks lost about 90% of farmland worth billions of dollars. Can you tell us a little bit more about the inspiration behind Long After We Are Gone? I understand why you wrote a book around the family that was, a part of this land loss crisis, but how did you go about deciding the people and the circumstances that would tell this very important story?
Yeah. So when I was halfway finished with my first book, One Summer in Savannah, I wasn't sure what kind of writer I wanted to be yet. I mean, it was my debut novel, and it's more upmarket fiction. So I didn't have a niche. I wanted to have a niche or something to be known for. So I wasn't sure what that was yet. And halfway through the research of One Summer in Savannah, which deals with a really heavy theme, it tells the story of a woman who conceived a child after a sexual assault and has a very difficult decision to make, whether or not to allow her attacker's family into her daughter's life. And as a librarian, even though I need to tell people that now I'm a former librarian, I love research. And so I was like, why do I know more about this topic, conception after a sexual assault? And so I just wanted to write a book that really raised awareness to that topic. And then I was like, oh, there it is. That's what I want to do. I want to tell stories that highlight these unknown circumstances that happen to people every day that we don't talk about very much. And so I said, okay, I'm going to wait for the inspiration to come. And the inspiration came not too long after that in an article that I read in the New Yorker about these two brothers, Melvin Davis and LaCurtis Reels of North Carolina, who went to jail for 8 years. Now, I said jail because they were never convicted, for 8 years after they refused to leave the land that their great-grandfather had purchased 100 years prior. And I thought, how is that possible? How's that legal? How can this land be sold out from underneath them? And so I started doing research because I'm a librarian, or was at that time, and loved research. And I was so frustrated and shocked and confused as not only to what happened to them, but that I'd never heard of the term heir property before. Has anybody here heard of heir property before? Okay, a couple of people, which is great. I'd never heard of it before. And so I knew then that I wanted to write a story that raised awareness to heir property. Because see, now when you guys leave here, everybody here has heard of heir property. And so that's the whole idea of writing a book which features something like this, is that now we can educate you all on heir property.
I love that. And I really did have that feeling as I was reading it, especially after coming to the end. I was like, wow, I actually need to get my things in order and make sure that my families are in order as well. So it really did do just that. And the author's note, you also mentioned that Long After We Are Gone is about family and the secrets we keep and the things we refuse to let go. The story is told through the perspective of 4 siblings, and each of their secrets is unique and manifests itself in a particular way. Most of the secrets are very, very big and heavy. How did you go about deciding what each character was withholding? Do you believe these sorts of secrets are specifically big within the Black community?
No, not necessarily. Well, okay, as a writer, I don't see scenes when I write. I hear voices. My husband says, stop telling people that. But I hear the voices, like the characters speak to me. But I never want to try to force anything. And so I knew I wanted to write a family saga, because when you think of heir property and what it is and what the problem a lot of these families are having now, it's something that's passed down from generation to generation. So what is that? That's intergenerational trauma. So I thought, okay, I want to tell a family saga, a family drama. But who are these siblings? How do I tell this story? And so I just kind of waited to see what the inspiration was. And the first character that came to me was Junior. And I thought, what would be the problems that they could potentially have that would be passed down from generation to generation? So you have Junior, who's the oldest. And in the South, you know, when the eldest dies, the oldest tends to take over and be responsible for that. And I thought, well, maybe he doesn't want to do that. Maybe he doesn't want to have anything to do with the land. So as the eldest, you know, when King died, King is their father, when he died, he has to take over. But he didn't really want to have anything to do with that, because he's not living his true, authentic life. Junior is a closeted gay man who's married to a woman and have 2 beautiful girls, but he's not living his true, authentic life. And now he not only has that secret, but he has to return home to save this land that he never really wanted anything to do with. And so they kind of came to me slowly by surely. Then you have Mance, the second son. Now, Mance is very much like his father. He loves the land, lives on the land, but he suffers from anxiety and a temper problem that has landed him in prison more than once. And so can you imagine, he loves this land so much, and then he has a temper problem. So you can about imagine how difficult that was for him. And then Mance was this very manly man. And he's just a strong man, but then his girlfriend gave birth to a special needs son who was deaf. So could you imagine this very manly man that suffers from anxiety, that has a temper problem, and now he has to be really soft and delicate with his son. And so he gets butts up against that. And then you have Cece, who is the eldest daughter. And yeah, when I say you like to have family messy dramas, this book is messy. So I really want you guys to be prepared for the mess that's in this book. You're probably going to want to throw it across the room because, you know, that's what families are. They're messy sometimes, or if not all the time. And so I wanted these characters to feel real. I wanted them to be your coworker, can be your brother, can be your cousin, can be your next door neighbor. I want them to feel real. And Cece she's very much like Junior. She not only didn't want anything to do with the land, but she didn't like the area at all. And so she thought she was too good for that area. And she wanted to do something better for herself. And so she made herself this promise that she was going to go to college and become a lawyer. And she did that. But it takes money to do stuff like that. And so in order to maintain a certain lifestyle, Cece has embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from her law firm. And now she has to come back home to face this. And the lawyer, of course, that's helping her with the case is the love of her life, who she walked away from, you know, of course. That's the romance.
Love it.
And then finally we have Toki, who's never fit with her family, never felt at home with her family. She felt this loss. They never really knew their mother. And when you read the book, you'll see they never really knew their father either. And so she fills this void that she has using some very self-destructive manners. And so I wanted these characters to feel real, but I also wanted to really have that thread of intergenerational trauma, and that these issues that feel very individual to them are not individual to them, that it comes and it came from the people that came before them, which is why the book is entitled Long After We're Gone. I hope I answered that question.
That was beautiful. And I'm so happy that you broke down all of the characters, because one of the things that I've been dying to ask you, I'm so impressed by the fact that you've written 4 very different perspectives and all so well. So I struggle with writing different perspectives in this way, but I also struggle sometimes with reading books that are from multiple perspectives, because sometimes you don't want to sit with one of the characters, or sometimes you feel like one character is not as fleshed out as another character. And I think as a writer, it's very hard to strike the balance between them. And that's just if you have 2 different characters.
That's right.
You have 4.
That's right.
So I'm just interested, like, how did you achieve writing 4 different characters so well? I do know an author, her name is LaToya Watkins, who like literally takes her characters to therapy.
Wow.
Is there anything like that, anything unique that you do or you've done in order to make sure that all of the characters were equally fleshed out?
No, and I did, no, and I do not know how I did that. When I turned this book in, I was exhausted, just because there were 4 characters, actually 5, because you have this 4 siblings, but then you have Ellis. Ellis is Mance's best friend, and that's also Cece's, the love of Cece's life. And in the middle of writing this, Ellis decided that he wanted to have a larger role than I originally planned for him to have. And so now you basically have these 5 siblings. But I have no idea how that came together. I knew I wanted, in the South, you tend to have these large families. And the problem, and in order to show the problem of heir property, is over time, there can be quite a few heirs to this land. And so I wanted to show this really big family. So I knew I wanted more than 3. And so I was like, okay, 4. And I also used a book by William Faulkner, As I Lay Dying, as the inspiration for this book. And if you remember that story, it tells the story of the family that seeks to fulfill their mother's dying wish, which is to be buried in Jefferson, Mississippi. And in order to tell that story, Faulkner used 15 different points of view. And I thought, yeah, no way that I could do 15, but I thought 4 could really highlight and talk about it a much better way. So, but yeah, I don't know how I was able to keep track of all of them. So, and I said I will never write a book with that many POVs again, ever.
Well, you did it very well, so kudos to you. I was also impressed by the depth of your characters and how many emotions I felt for them. A couple of them are so conflicted that the choices that they make can be frustrating or even disheartening. And they made me think about a Roxane Gay article, Not Here to Make Friends. It's about the importance of unlikable characters. Gay writes, I am often drawn to unlikable characters, to those who behave in socially unacceptable ways and say whatever is on their mind and do what they want with varying levels of regard for the consequences. I want characters to be the most honest of all things human. Writers are often told a character isn't likable as literary criticism, as if a character's likability is directly proportional to the quality of a novel's writing. This is particularly true for women in fiction. In literature, as in life, the rules are all too often different for girls. Gay says that when a man is unlikable, he's often considered dark and brooding, but when a female character is unlikable, it becomes a point of obsession and critical conversation. So let's talk about Cece. Her sections were actually my favorite, and I couldn't get enough of reading about her, and yet for the greater part of the story, I found her fairly unlikable. Was that something that was on your mind as you crafted her character? Do you consider likability at all? And do you think characters need to be likable or unlikable for that matter?
Yeah, I'm so happy for you to this question, because the feedback what little feedback that I see, because I do not read reviews, is that some of these characters are unlikable. And I don't understand that. I mean, I am a huge reader, and I don't like to read books where everything is so perfect and everybody's so, who wants to read that? It's boring to me. So I want some conflict. And I feel like if a writer makes me mad or sad or cry, they did their job because they wrote something that made me feel something. If you feel anything, that means the writer won. And so when people feel something, or if they feel angry about a character, their first instinct is to say, I don't like it. But they don't stop to think that the writer did that on purpose. Like, that's purposeful. They did that on purpose. So they made you feel something. So yeah, Cece is a very unlikable character. She, in addition to, you know, embezzling all this money away from her law firm, she, her king, their father, could barely read and write. And so he would get these letters from all these different attorneys, and he would send them to her. And she did not read them. She did not help him. So one of the reasons why this is happening to their family is because she just neglected to do this. And so that makes her unlikable. You're like, this is her fault. Like, why are you this way? But Cece is somebody's sister. Cece is somebody's aunt. Cece is a real person that just made some really bad decisions and choices. But you know what? You love them anyway. You know, your sister may get on your nerves, your cousin may get on your nerves, but you love them anyway. And so I don't believe in writing just completely likable characters. I feel like that's boring.
Yeah. I like what you were saying about Cece feeling like she could be someone that you know. And I think that's what made her so, you know, what made me so interested and intrigued by her, is because she felt like I was bothered by her, but she was still like relatable in this way. And I still understood her. Like, she was stuck. And I was just like reading, like, to try to figure out how she was going to get out of the place that she was in. And so speaking about this, the book is a heavy, deep one, but it didn't always feel that way while reading it. There's levity to it. So I'm wondering, how did you strike that balance? You know, something that is about something so big. You're talking about this crisis of, you know, people losing land, you know, over the course of 70 years. And, you know, how do you write a book that's about that, with every character having these big secrets, and still make it light in places?
Yeah, I learned that when I wrote my first book, One Summer in Savannah. That book is heavy. It deals with a very heavy theme, and I just didn't want to depress everybody. And so for those that have read One Summer in Savannah, I inserted things like the Pizza Friday and them going to the beach, just to kind of take that weight off of everyone having to read such a heavy topic. And so I want to do that with this one, because all four of these siblings are dealing with some major issues, in addition to the overarching issue of them trying to save their family land. And so I want to infuse some light moments in here just to take the foot off of all the emotion, because there are some big, big emotions in this book.
Absolutely. So you talked a little before about like the generational trauma of it all. I want to talk about history repeating itself, because that's also something that I've seen throughout the novel. And in terms of the larger, you know, like generations repeating each other's mistakes. But also you did something interesting where they're also repeating their own mistakes in their own lives. And so what inspired you to write a story that's so cyclical in that way?
Well, because that's what intergenerational trauma tends to be. You know, when you have a father or a mother and it's their issue, they tend to pass it down. And then guess what? That child tends to pass it down. And so I wanted to show the intergenerational trauma that these children had from their father and from their mother. And one of the issues that they were dealing with was the detriment of miscommunication. They didn't talk to each other. We do that now. You know, we don't be honest about things. And I am of a generation, or remember a generation, where you didn't talk to your grandmother. She didn't tell you about her past. You didn't talk to your grandfather. They didn't talk about their past. They just say, you know what? No, I don't want to talk about it. They didn't talk about those things. But what you see in this book is how detriment it is, because if their father and their mother, they just would have talked about some of these issues, these children would not have had these issues. But what they think is, oh, this is just my issue. They don't even know that it was something that was passed down to them unbeknownst to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into place a little bit. Throughout the novel, this mention of characters getting out of their southern hometown digs, you know, that's a big thing for Cece. She wants to leave, and throughout the novel, there's kind of the contemplation of whether or not they should come back. This made me think about the Great Migration, but also I thought about Charles Blow's current take on reversing migration. If you don't own home or land already, the point of entry in the South is way lower than it is up north. We can own land and build and create here in the South in a way that is harder to do there or in the Midwest. Was this book a call for Black people to come back to the South? Is that something that you were considering as you wrote it?
Yes, because if you look at the term air property, but not just air property, a lot of this land is being lost today. So in my research, I discovered so many different examples of land loss across the board, not just using air property, but eminent domain, partial sales, tax sales. People are losing their land. And one of the reasons why is because they're in the rural areas. And let's be honest, a lot of the generation, they don't want to live in these rural areas anymore. They want to live in the city. You know, that's the country. But what's happening is, so they're walking away from this. And we're talking a lot of land in these places. And so, yes, it is somewhat of a, without educating people and preaching to people, it is a way of saying, you know, let's be mindful of this land that we have because it's all we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I moved back from from New York to Atlanta during the pandemic, partially for that reason, so I can really relate to it. I want to get into the romance, which is something I felt was done particularly well throughout the book. And, you know, you mentioned Cece and Ellis and that romance, but there's also, there's lots of beautiful romance. Mance has a really beautiful romance. Junior has romance in his story as well. What do you draw on when writing romance, and how does it feel to write the particularly romantic scenes?
Yeah. So I love love. My husband says, you love love. I love love. So even though I don't write romance, all of my books will have a romantic element to it. And I thought that maybe all four of the siblings would have like a romance. And I was like, no, maybe not. That's a little overkill. But I wanted, in all the different romances in this book, the relationships, I want to show a different type of relationship. So Junior is a closeted gay man who's in love with a man named Simon. And I wanted to show that not only is he closeted, but that their relationship can be normal and can be regular. And I wanted to show that. And then with Mance and Leisha, he's proposed to her several times and she won't say yes because, you know, she can't trust that he's gonna not beat somebody up and go back to prison. And so I just think in terms of what's realistic, you know, and real. I want my characters and the books that you read to feel very, very, very real. But I also like romance, so I want to add a little bit, you know, up to that. And that's part of the light part of the book, you know, is that these people, despite of everything that they're battling and going through, that they can still be in love and fall in love.
I love that. So I'm interested then, what are you reading or watching now, and how does that impact your writing?
I am listening to Long After We're Gone by this author. I'm listening to this book. I'm listening to my book on audio, and it's amazing. I really love it. And you know, we turn these books in and we just kind of wash our hands of it. And it's like, okay. And so I said, I want to listen to it. It came out on Tuesday. I'm listening to the audiobook to it. And I'm listening to it and I'm like, did I write that? I'm like, ooh, I wrote that. That's good. I like that. So I'm actually in the last couple of chapters of my own particular book right now. And I am rewatching Grey's Anatomy. I don't know why. I told my mom, who's here, I was like, okay, I'm going to stop at a certain point, and I haven't. I'm still watching it, still watching it, still watching it. But I love, as you can tell, I like dramas. I love dramas because I draw a lot of inspiration from watching things like Grey's Anatomy. This Is Us, it was very much an inspiration for this book because the emotional heft of that show, of all the things they dealt with, so stuff like that, that's what I'm watching.
I love that. Can you tell us what you're working on now? You mentioned to me that you were on deadline.
I can.
Okay.
I can.
Love to hear about it.
Because the contract is signed, so we can talk about it now.
Yay.
So I am working on my third book. It's called, it's tentatively called The Flower Farmer. Because I say tentative because my publisher loves to change my titles. The original title for Long After We're Gone was Airland, H-E-I-R, land. And I loved that. And I thought for sure that I was and they were like, no. It didn't test very well, so Long After We're Gone tested. So the third book is The Flower Farmer. For now, you may see something completely different. But it's about a woman who and I'm not going to spoil it. She gets out of prison. We're not going to talk about how she gets out of prison. And she has a lot of childhood trauma that she's dealing with. And so she is on the run and dealing with her childhood trauma. And so she seeks and finds work on a flower farm in Alabama. And so, yes. And then the love part is, of course, there's a hunky flower farmer named Jackson that's going to help her find herself and find love.
I love that. Was there like a with this book, there was the air property and you learning about that sparked that. Is there something like that
Yeah.
in that book as well?
Yeah. I think all of my books are going to be inspired by a real true story. And when I was halfway finished with Long After We're Gone, I read this article about this man named Bobby Love who walked out of prison. He didn't escape. He was not released, but he walked out of prison and he lived 30 years of his life he got married. He had children. He became a deacon in his church. And he swore that he would live his life as a good, upstanding citizen. He'll never commit any more crimes. And then one day, knock at the door. And the wife opened the door and they asked for this man by a different name. And she said, there's no one here by that name. And the police officer was like, that's him. And so I thought, what would that be like to live your life knowing that any day it could be over with? And so I wanted to kind of tap into that a little bit.
Oh, that sounds really good. I'm excited for that one. What is your writing process like? How often do you write? Are you a morning writer or night writer?
Yeah. I am is there any writers in this room besides the two of us? Yeah, I have a very chaotic writing style that I don't recommend to anyone. I write everything longhand. So my notebook is there if anybody wants to see it. I write everything longhand. I am more of a morning writer. As the day goes on, my thought process, the creative, it tends to fall out. When I was working as a librarian, I would just be able to have time to write in the evenings and on the weekends because, I worked a 9-to-5 job. But I tend to, so far, I write the ends of my books first, if you can believe that. I know how the book ends, and then I just kind of write to the end. So for One Summer in Savannah, I knew how I wanted that to end. For this book, I knew exactly how I wanted it to end, and I just kind of write to the end. So somewhat chaotic, but it works.
Yeah, I love that. And what was the editing process like for this one in particular? Was there a lot of edits that you had to do, or was it pretty much seamless?
It was some. Now, my editor, she's not my editor anymore. She only read the first chapter of this book. And I just worked on it because I work with a freelance editor and we've worked together for a couple of books. And so me and her kind of work on it before I officially turn it in to my publisher. And I was so nervous about it because it's so different than One Summer in Savannah. It's different. And I thought, okay, I'm so nervous. I was so nervous. That's why I didn't share it with her. And I told her, I promise you're going to like it, but it's different. And that's all that I told her about it. And I sent her the first chapter. And she was like, Terah, if the rest of the chapters are like this, I'm fine. I don't have to see it. And so when she read it, she was like, wow, okay. And, we're different in terms of how we think about things. So she's very mindful of what I'm trying to say. She's not from the South. So this book has some Southern isms in it. And she was like, what is a trailer? And I was like, a trailer, like a mobile home. And she was like, what is that? Because she doesn't understand. She's not Southern. She doesn't understand what that is. When I say lot rent, when you rent lots, trailers, lots, I said lot rent. She was like, what is that? And I was like, well, it's when an owner owns land and they rent that was a lot of that wasn't in One Summer in Savannah, that was in that. And so we kind of walked through the process of certain things together. So, but it wasn't a lot of edits. I think I did just one round with her.
Oh, I love that. Was that something like you're talking about some of the different things that you might feel like you have to explain? Do you do that in the book? I don't remember you necessarily like explaining anything in that way. Do you feel like the need to?
No, I don't. Well, now whenever I'm reading a book and I come across something that I don't know about, I just pull out my phone and Google it. So I don't feel like I don't want to handhold, the reader to stuff. So no, I didn't. But for her, she just needed an explanation as to visualize it, to see, what that looked like.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, that's my last question.
Perfect.
But it's been wonderful speaking. Oh, yes.
Yeah, of Questions?
Of course, you all probably
Any
have
questions?
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm only in chapter 3 on the Audible, but it's insane. I just keep rewinding and listening to it again. So kudos. It's been amazing. Thank you. But what I was gonna ask, when the book is sent to Audible, how do they pick who reads it? Because the guy that is narrating it is incredible.
I'm gonna tell him that. So his Deontay Black is the narrator, and so I am not yet a big enough name to be able to pick my narrator. You know, if you read Ann Patchett had Meryl Streep read Tom Lake, and I was like, goodness gracious. In her other book, The Dutch House, Tom Hanks read that, and I was like, goodness gracious. So not yet, not to where I can select it, but I was a little indifferent to the narrator that I had for One Summer in Savannah. So me and my agent were like, can we listen to a couple of the different, auditions so we can see what we like? And we just love Deontay. He did such a phenomenal job because there's 3 distinct male characters. There's Junior, there's Manson, there's Ellis. And I was like, I want to be able to hear the differences in the 3. And then you have King, who has some dialogue, and other people, and he did just a phenomenal job.
With Cece,
Even with
it's just amazing.
Yeah, he did a great job. I'll tell him, because he messaged me when he finished reading it. He found me on Twitter and he sent me a message, and he was like, thank you so much. I loved this book so much. And so, yeah, I'll tell him you said that.
Thank you.
Yes.
So you said the characters speak to you. Is it literal? Are you hearing different voices, or are you just getting content from your characters? Or are you hearing your characters?
All of that. All of that. So I keep a piece of paper and a pencil by my nightstand, because they'll wake me up and they'll keep me up. And so I'll just hear like a piece of dialogue or some context to something. And so Ellis was that character that really just, and I'm like, Ellis, you don't have a role. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to give him a role. That happened in One Summer in Savannah. When I originally was going to write that book, it was just going to have just a Sarah POV, and Jacob just came on really strong. And I thought, okay, well, he coming on strong. That's inspiration. I don't want to waste that. And so it became a dual POV with him. And I think it just made the book so much better.
Do you ever find with your characters that you intend for them to go a certain way and they kind of argue with you? They want to go another way.
Yes. So Ellis was that character, and there's an uncle in this book, which I won't spoil. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Yes. And I tend to let him. I don't outline. I don't know if you outline or not.
I don't wish.
I don't outline. I literally make up, once I know the end, I make up everything as I go along. So I am free to go wherever they want me to go, as long as we end up at this end. Yeah.
The story is involving siblings. Do you have siblings? Do you come from a large family?
Yes, I have 2 brothers. I'm the middle child. I have an older brother and a younger brother. And I will say, the Mance character is heavily inspired by my older brother.
Did they read it? Have your siblings read the book?
He's going to listen to it. Yeah, yeah. And he knows. Because if you read like in the back, in the little Q&A I did, I say that it's inspired by him. So he knows. Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever get afraid or frightened when stuff come to you, like that you need to write or anything? Does any of it ever scare you that you don't do it?
I don't not do it. I just tend to put it off. One Summer in Savannah was like that. It's a heavy book, and I just like, oh goodness, this is heavy. And so I tend to just put it off for a little while, but I don't ever ignore it, because if it's coming to me, then that means it's something that's supposed to come out. So I don't ignore it, but I do like put it off or kind of water it down a little bit.
Thank you.
Would you mind if we ask a question about One Summer in Savannah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so a small group of us just finished it. We just talked about it on Monday nights. Yeah. And in preparation to come here and talk about your second book. So one of the questions that we had was, how did you come up with the idea of putting all the poetry in the book? I love that.
Oh, that's awesome. So I wanted to have a character that was just that didn't speak traditionally. that did not speak traditionally. My mother is here. Mom, can you wave your hand? So her father, he suffered a stroke and he lost his ability to speak. But for the rest of his life, we had to decipher the things he was saying to us, doing gestures and movements and sounds. And I thought that could be a way of communicating. And so I thought, what other ways can we communicate? And I thought, why not poetry? You know, if you look at it, when you have to decipher someone's meaning, isn't that what poetry is? Don't you have to, when you read a poem, don't you have to take a time to decipher what you're trying to say? And so I thought, why not use poetry as his form of speech? And I thought that I could just maybe, it would be broken. So he would have some English and some poetry. But as I was writing, I just put the poems there. And I liked it when I went back and reread it. I really liked it. And I thought my editor would never let me have a character who spoke solely in poetry. And she was like, oh, I love it, leave it. So I was like, okay, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. I finished today. It's beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I wonder how you come up with all of your character names, and especially for this, you have 5 main characters. And all, like, I can tell you all their names, which is hard. I think hard. You know, I read a lot of books. I'm like, I don't know what's the brother's name. But so, how did you come up with so many?
Okay, they are inspired by my family names and my husband's family name. So Junior tends to be Junior because Junior's real name is King. And so he was a junior, so that was easy. Mance, my husband has an Uncle Mance. And Cecily is named after my great-great-grandfather, Cecil. So I used that, I just added the Cecily at the end. Toki's real name is Angeline, and me and my husband both have Angelines in our family history. So I just went to the families because I wanted them to sound Southern. And so I want them to be true Southern names. Toki is a really popular nickname where I live in Alabama. So I was like, I'm gonna use that. So just try to be as authentic with the Southern names as possible. Yes.
So in your foreword, you talked about Bruce Beach, you even mentioned Thomas Land and Gwinnett County. So if you haven't read the foreword, but after you bought the book from Virginia Highlands bookstore, it's here. But at any rate, did that surprise you that there were these contemporary sort of connections to the story?
No, because once I read about the 2 brothers and I started doing deep dive, I realized this is not historical. And when I tell people, oh, it's about this family could potentially lose their land, they assume that it happened back in the day. And I'm like, no, that happened today. I've spent a lot of time in South Carolina and Savannah, the Myrtle Beach area. It's really happening with the Gullah Geechee in the South Carolina. And that's because that area it's not air property, but it's protected. And recently, McIntosh County, the commissioners voted to remove the historical label from that area. And so then now you can have the corporations come in, and it's not air property for them being lost. But another way that they're losing their land is through taxes. So they're going to start buying up the land around it. So what does that do? That raises the property taxes. So you have families that were paying a couple of hundred, maybe a couple of thousands of dollars are now they're overdeveloping the land. And so that's one of the takeaways from this book is this is not historical. This is still happening today. And so if you have family land or think you have family land, try to shore that up. Speak to a real estate attorney and figure it out. And if you have air property, especially if you have air property, make sure that you can protect your land. Awesome. So again, I will plug the bookstore is here now. Janelle has a book called Gone Like Yesterday, and Terah's book is called Long After We Are Gone. So there's some similarities there. But both books are here, as is One Summer in Savannah. So please patronize, support our authors here. Again, there's plenty of popcorn left, so please grab that. And thank you so much for being here. If you want to purchase a book or just hang around, Terah will be signing books here for you. Thank you.